70 years in service, 40 modifications, and the status of a legend that has never been surpassed. Today, the focus is on the C-130 Hercules, a machine that rewrote the laws of military logistics. How did it happen that American equipment, known for its finickiness, has been flying for decades in the hands of adversaries without original spare parts? What were Soviet engineers looking for in the wreckage of a reconnaissance aircraft shot down over Armenia in '58? And why does this veteran still cost less than its modern competitors? We will analyze the non-obvious design decisions that made this aircraft immortal. Be sure to watch the episode to the end. The final facts will make you look anew at how a simple transport became the main long liver of world aviation. Let's get started. The early 50s. The jet age has already arrived. Machines are appearing in the sky that did not even exist on blueprints 5 years ago. Yet cargo is still carried by engines from the past. Piston engines. Large, heavy, fine-tuned to the last screw. And they worked impeccably. That was the whole paradox. No one complained about reliability. They complained that the world around them had changed, but they had not. A piston engine is a complex machine with hundreds of moving parts. To squeeze full power out of it, you need high-quality fuel, careful maintenance, and the hands of an experienced mechanic. On a large base with hangars and warehouses, this is not a problem. But where there are no hangars, everything becomes more difficult. And that was exactly where transport planes had to fly more and more often. The conflict on the Korean Peninsula showed the military one unpleasant thing. Cargo and people had to be delivered not to convenient rear airfields, but to the very line of action. To short, broken, rain-soaked runways. To places where there was no concrete, no equipment, nothing but packed dirt and a couple of 100 meters of flat ground. Light transport aircraft made it, but carried almost nothing. Heavy ones took a lot of cargo, but could not land on such a site in principle. They required a full-fledged runway 1.5 kilometers long. A gap yawned between these extremes. And it was precisely into this gap that the cargo needed below fell. In early 1951, the Tactical Air Command finally formulated what it wanted. On paper, the list was short. In reality, it was almost mocking. The aircraft had to carry a serious cargo and at the same time take off from a short dirt runway. It had to fly fast by the standards of those years and yet remain economical. It had to reach thousands of kilometers and get by without airfield amenities, landing where usually only light aircraft would land. Each point individually was feasible, but together they formed something that engineers back then did not really know how to build. Speed always argued with economy, payload capacity with short takeoff, range with everything else. The good old Piston could not handle this task. It hit its own ceiling and would go no further, no matter how much it was coaxed. The order went out for competition among aircraft manufacturers, and what the engineers of one of them drew in response looked so strange that it almost cost the company its good name. The firm was called Lockheed. By the early 50s, it had established a reputation as a master of beautiful, sleek machines. And here its engineers sat down to design a transport plane based on that very nearly impossible list of requirements. Very quickly, they ran into a simple truth. If you chase beauty, you cannot meet the requirements. You have to choose, either an elegant silhouette or an airplane that actually does its job. They chose the job. The result was something painful to look at for a person in love with aviation. A high wing set directly on the hunched back of the fuselage, a thick, short body resembling a boxcar with wings, an upturned tail, and at the rear, a wide ramp that folds down to the ground so that a truck could simply drive inside. No flight of fancy, pure utility. And not everyone in the firm itself liked it. According to legend, one of its most respected designers, a man whose name was already an aviation legend, was strongly against it. He believed that this clumsy box would ruin Lockheed's good name. He argued that a company known for elegant machines should not release such a thing into the sky. They did not listen to him. The prototype was built, and on August 23, 1954, it took off for the first time from the runway of the airfield in Burbank, California. Test pilots sat in the cockpit, and nearby, in an accompanying plane, flew that very skeptic to see with his own eyes what he did not believe in. The flight lasted just over an hour, and by the landing, everything became clear. The machine did not just stay in the air, it was responsive, flying confidently and steadily as if it had been refined for decades. The skeptic, as they say, changed his mind even before the wheels touched the ground. The man who intended to kill this project had made a bigger mistake than ever before in his long and brilliant career. Externally, the plane remained awkward, but it was not about looks at all. Lockheed made its main bet not on the shape of the fuselage or even on the clever ramp. They made it on what was hidden under the wing, an engine of a completely new kind which had essentially never been installed on transport aircraft before. The engine was called the Allison T-56, and to understand why it decided everything, one must look at what the engineers had to choose from. They had two options on the table, and both were bad. The first was the Piston engine, the one with a century-old lineage. Powerful, familiar, but already squeezed dry. Hundreds of moving parts, heavy weight, an appetite for good fuel, and a constant need for care. Raising its power even higher was possible only at the cost of extreme complication. The second option was a pure jet engine. New, fashionable, swift. It was excellent at accelerating light aircraft high in the sky, but it did not suit a transport plane. Near the ground and at low speed, it gulped fuel as if it wanted to drain the tanks in one sitting. And it was precisely near the ground, during a short takeoff run, that a heavy cargo aircraft did not need speed. It needed raw, stubborn thrust. And so the engineers took a third path. They took the best of both. A turboprop engine is easiest to explain like this. Inside, a gas turbine spins, the same hot heart as a jet engine. But it delivers almost all of its power not to the exhaust, but to turn a large propeller in front. The result is a rare combination. The machine gets the power and endurance of a turbine, and at the same time the tight, economical grip of a propeller at low speeds. The large propeller scoops up a huge volume of air. On takeoff, this provides that very stubborn thrust that tears a loaded plane off a short runway. And upon landing, the blades are reversed and they begin to brake, helping the machine come to a halt in a matter of meters. There was also another plus, imperceptible at first glance, but invaluable at the edge of the world. The turbine did not need finicky, high-grade gasoline. It calmly drank simple kerosene fuel. Fewer requirements for fuel, fewer fragile parts inside. Fewer reasons to break down where there is no one to fix it. And the power reserve of this heart was solid. Each of the four engines produced about 4,000 horsepower, and in later versions, even more. This is roughly as much as a powerful mainline diesel locomotive pulls. 4 engines, and it turns out that the aircraft is lifted into the sky by 4 locomotives at once, hidden under a single wing. But even a perfect engine is only half the battle. You can install the strongest heart, but without a properly tailored body, it will pull nothing. The second half of the secret was not hidden under the wing at all. It was in the very proportions of the machine. So what was this formula? On paper, it looked almost obscenely simple. About 20 tons of payload, speed up to 600 kilometers per hour, a range of several thousand kilometers without landing. Each number individually did not shine with anything special. What shone was that they all coexisted in a single machine. And yet, the main trick was not even in the numbers. It was in how the aircraft was arranged inside. The cargo floor was made flat and raised exactly to the height of the bed of a standard truck. And at the rear, under that very upturned tail, they placed a wide ramp down to the ground. And here is what came of it. A truck backs up to the aircraft, the ramp drops, and the cargo transfers inside with almost no effort. No cranes, no hoists, no special equipment. You could simply drive a wheeled vehicle straight into the belly of the plane and drive it back out the same way. Today, this sounds mundane. In the 50s, it was a revelation. Most transports of that era were loaded from the side, through narrow doors, straining over every box. But what was truly incredible was not the cargo or the ramp. What was incredible was the takeoff. When that very first prototype began its takeoff run, the engineers clocked the distance at which it lifted off the runway. It turned out to be about 260 meters. 260. An aircraft of this size was supposed to accelerate for about 1,500 meters before lifting its wheels. But this plane did the same thing in a distance nearly 6 times shorter. This was what turned the whole game around. 1,500 meters of flat pavement are not found just anywhere. But a patch of firm ground of 200 to 300 meters can be found almost anywhere. The machine ceased to depend on large airfields. It essentially carried its airfield with it, in the form of its own wheels. Here it is, the formula. A payload the size of a loaded truck, decent speed, long range, and takeoff from almost a postage stamp. On paper, everything aligned perfectly. Only paper tolerates anything. The real question was different. Would this beautiful scheme withstand dust, dirt, temperature extremes, and long years of service where maintenance is the last thing on anyone's mind? American equipment has a persistent reputation. People say everything is complex, delicate, finicky. At the slightest issue, a mechanic clutches his head. Sometimes there is a grain of truth in this, but the Hercules breaks this reputation over its knee. Where does finickiness come from anyway? From complexity. The more fragile, precise, fastidious parts a machine has, the more reasons it has to fail at the most inopportune moment. But this plane was drawn the opposite way from the very beginning, for rough hands, dirty runways, and miserable conditions. Remember what it is assembled from: a turbine instead of a piston labyrinth, simple fuel instead of high grade, strong landing gear designed for impact against uneven ground rather than a gentle touchdown on clean concrete. It does not need a hangar. It does not need a perfect runway. It is content with a flat piece of land, a drum of fuel, and a person who knows how to hold a wrench. A field airstrip somewhere at the edge of the map looks unsightly. Dust swirling from under the propellers, puddles in which wheels bog down. No tower, no warehouses, no warm bay for repairs. For most planes, such conditions are a reason to stay on the ground. For the Hercules, it is just another workday. And this is where the most curious part begins. Around the world, there are machines whose owners long ago lost contact with the manufacturer. Some were cut off by distance, others by closed borders and supply bans. Original spare parts are nowhere to be found, nor are they expected. It would seem that this would be the end of the aircraft, but no, these Hercules continue to fly, for decades. Mechanics gather them literally bit by bit. They machine parts themselves, strip units from other aircraft, and devise replacements for what simply cannot be obtained. And the plane forgives them this improvisation. It rises again. This is the ultimate form of reliability. Not the kind where everything works smoothly in a clean laboratory, but the kind where the machine holds together on a wing and a prayer and human stubbornness, and still takes to the sky. Such endurance did its job. Everyone who needed to carry something far and in any conditions wanted the Hercules, except they carried not only cargo in it. Very soon, it was adapted for a far quieter and far less noticeable task, one that outsiders were not supposed to know about. By the late 50s, the world was split in two. Two vast forces watched each other closely, not trusting a single word, and both desperately wanted to know what was happening on the other side of the border. This is where the qualities of the Hercules came in handy. Large, reliable, capable of staying in the air for a long time and carrying a massive equipment, it was ideally suited for the role of a flying observation station. The cargo hold was packed not with boxes, but with equipment and people listening to the radio airwaves of the opposing side. Outside, an ordinary transport. Inside, finely tuned ears. Such machines patrolled along closed borders, cautiously, without crossing the line. The work was quiet and almost invisible. Almost. On September 2, 1958, one of these aircraft took off from a base in Turkey and followed its usual route, along the southern border of the Soviet Union. It was supposed to stay parallel to the line without approaching it closely, but something went wrong. The aircraft ended up in the sky over the territory of Soviet Armenia, where it was not supposed to be. 4 MiG-17 fighters scrambled to meet it. The aircraft was intercepted. It did not return from that flight. The wreckage came down on Soviet soil. And here, the story takes an unexpected turn. Until that day, engineers on the other side of the border had seen the new American transport only from afar, in photographs and dry reports. But now, its parts lay directly in their hands. They could disassemble, measure, and understand how it was constructed from the inside. A loss for some turned into a rare opportunity to study the machine for others. The cold irony of that tense time. But something else was far more important. This single incident revealed what was not written in the newspapers. By that time, the Hercules was no longer just a truck with wings. It had managed to become eyes and ears, a quiet observer at the most sensitive frontiers of the planet. And since they trusted it with such a mission, it meant they believed in this machine in earnest. While this quiet, muted story was unfolding on one side of the world, Something completely opposite was being prepared on the other. Noisy, audacious, something that almost none of the battle-hardened pilots believed in. A test that would later be called pure madness, and which the Hercules would go ahead and pass. A 40-meter giant comes in for a landing, except the runway beneath it is not land. It is the deck of a ship in the middle of the ocean, and it is swaying. Wind gusts against the hull at nearly 100 kilometers per hour. The deck rises and falls to the height of a 2-story building. And toward this dancing platform heads a transport plane that has neither an arrestor hook nor a catapult under its wheels. Only a pilot, 4 propellers, and cold calculation. The wheels touch the steel. The machine comes to a stop in 80 meters and immediately takes off into the sky again. To understand how it came to this, let us rewind a bit. In the early 60s, the Navy had a thorn in its side. Aircraft carriers went thousands of kilometers from the shore, and there was simply nothing to deliver heavy cargo to them, such as spare engines. A small carrier-based plane carried little and did not fly far. And the question arose, could they land a larger machine on the deck, for example the Hercules? The idea sounded wild. The deck was designed for compact aircraft with a hook that catches a cable and abruptly halts momentum. The Hercules did not fit into this scheme at all. Too big, too heavy. And yet, they decided to test it. They took a tanker version from the Marine Corps, stripped everything unnecessary, strengthened the nose gear, and installed improved brakes. They did not install a hook, there simply was none. And on the side, they painted a short, cheeky inscription, something like, "Look ma, no hook." Test pilot James Flatley sat at the controls. On October 30th, 1963, his aircraft approached the aircraft carrier USS Forrestal, about 800 kilometers from shore. What happened next was hard to comprehend even for eyewitnesses. Time and again, the 40-meter behemoth approached and landed. 29 touch and goes, 21 full landings, 21 takeoffs, under its own power, without any assistance. And all of this at various weights, up to 50-plus tons. At low payload, the machine stopped within 80 meters. 80. That is only twice the span of its own wings. An ordinary Hercules needs about 700 meters to land. Here, it managed in a tenth of that. For this flight, Flatley was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. The experiment was declared a complete success. They proved it was possible. And that is precisely why they never repeated it in earnest again. Too tight, too high a risk. The Navy chose a smaller and simpler aircraft. And the Hercules remained one of a kind, the largest and heaviest aircraft ever to land on a deck. This record remains unbroken to this day. That very plane was later placed in a museum as a monument to a beautiful audacity. But the question remains, if this aircraft can land on a swaying steel deck in the middle of the ocean, what else is it capable of landing on? The answer turns out to be no less strange, on ice. There are places in the world where no road leads. The interior regions of Antarctica, the ice sheet of Greenland, wintering stations cut off from the world for long months, where the nearest human is hundreds of kilometers of empty ice away. You cannot drive there, and you cannot sail there. You can only fly there. But how do you land where there is not and cannot be a runway? Where beneath you is not earth, but loose snow and ice? They found a simple and elegant answer. They fitted the Hercules with skis. Not just any skis, but huge ones, several meters long, to match the machine itself. They fit right over the wheels. If a hard runway is needed, the plane extends its wheels and lands as usual. If there is a snowfield beneath it, it stands on its skis and slides across it as if on a groomed track. One machine, yet beneath its landing gear lie 2 completely different worlds. And so these ski-equipped Hercules have been carrying life itself to the end of the world for decades. Fuel for generators, food, equipment for scientists, replacement teams of polar explorers. Without these flights, many stations simply could not exist. The view from on board is almost unearthly. Whiteness to the very horizon without a single landmark. The snow merges with the sky so that you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. Frost past -50, which makes metal brittle and fuel thicken. And in the midst of this icy silence, the steady, stubborn hum of 4 propellers. Taking off from loose snow for a heavily loaded machine is not easy. The skis stick, the takeoff run stretches indefinitely. At one time, they resorted to a trick, Small, rocket-assisted takeoff units were attached to the fuselage. At the right moment, they gave a short, powerful push, and the plane broke away from the snow where it would otherwise have bogged down for good. This is the whole character of the machine. Where others are forbidden to enter, it works routinely, like a mail carrier on a familiar route. Ice, cold, the very edge of geography, this is its native element. But something else is even more striking. The very same plane that calmly lands on a frozen ocean is capable of doing the exact opposite. It flies where all living things flee without looking back, into the very heart of a roaring storm. Every year, giant vortices are born over warm oceans, tropical hurricanes, a wall of wind and water hundreds of kilometers in diameter, slowly crawling toward the shore. And on how accurately people guess where it will turn and what strength it will reach depends the fate of entire cities. The trouble is that from afar, such a vortex cannot really be measured. A satellite sees it from above, a beautiful swirl of clouds. But what is happening inside the hurricane, what the pressure is there, at what speed the wind strikes near the very core, cannot be seen from the outside. Yet these very numbers decide everything. This means someone has to fly in there. This work was taken on by a special Hercules, a weather reconnaissance aircraft. A machine packed with instruments and sent to do exactly what all living things run from, to enter straight into the hurricane. The flight looks like this. The plane flies low, near the boiling mass itself, quietly at first. Then the wall begins, the angriest part of the vortex. The machine is tossed up and down, banked, shaken so much that the instruments on the panel dance. The propellers roar, tearing through the wind that strives to push the plane back. And then, a sudden silence. The machine breaks through the wall and emerges into the eye of the hurricane, into the very center. Here it is strangely calm, there is almost no wind, and all around cloud walls rise to the sky. A few minutes of quiet in the heart of the monster, and then back through the wall, out. Along the way, the crew drops narrow drop-sons into the storm. As they fall, each transmits by radio what is happening at different altitudes, pressure, wind, temperature. This data goes to forecasters on shore, and the forecast turns from a rough guess into a precise calculation. And a precise forecast means hours, if not days, of a head start for the people below. Time to get out of the hurricane's way, reinforce homes, and prepare. One such flight is capable of saving thousands of lives. And here arises a question that is hard to answer calmly. Who in their right mind flies time and again into what everyone else is fleeing? And what kind of machine withstands this over and over, year after year, without falling apart? The Hercules learned to enter the elements of water and wind and emerge whole. But there is an element against which it acts no longer as a scout, but as a defender. One that does not forgive a single second of delay. Fire. A forest fire does not wait. It moves faster than a car driving off-road, leaps over ravines and roads, and consumes hectares in minutes. It is almost impossible for ground crews to keep up with it, especially where there are no roads or water nearby. This front must be hit from above, and quickly. And here, the Hercules takes the stage once more. Only this time, the trick is not in the machine itself, but in what can be rolled into it. They devised an ingenious thing, an entire firefighting module on wheels. It is rolled into the cargo compartment of an ordinary transport plane in a matter of hours. No factory modifications, no special version. What was once a truck with wings becomes an aerial firefighter. Once the dangerous season ends, the module is rolled back out and the aircraft returns to its usual work. Inside the module are thousands of liters of fire retardant, that very reddish mixture that flashes in footage of forest fires. The plane descends over the edge of the fire, passes low over it, and in a few seconds pours out the entire supply in a long strip. And the supply is substantial. In a single pass, the machine drops about 11,000 liters. To put it in perspective, it is as if 4 or 5 fire trucks were overturned onto the flames all at once, in a single motion, straight from the air. The mixture settles in a wide red ribbon on the trees and ground ahead of the fire, and it establishes a barrier that the flames can no longer cross. The aircraft does not so much extinguish as it cuts off, blocking the front's path and giving the people below a chance to regain control of the situation. One pass, turnaround, another pass. Time after time, as long as there is mixture in the tanks and light in the sky. Where ground teams would bog down for days, the machine buys time in a single flight. And here, it is worth stopping and looking back. A quiet observer at the border, a ski-equipped polar explorer, a storm chaser, now a firefighter as well. And all of this is the very same plane, the very same foundation. So how many faces does this machine actually have? Far more than one might think. Most aircraft are born for a single task and do only that for their entire lives. A fighter remains a fighter. A passenger airliner remains an airliner. But the Hercules turned out to be a rare exception. Its airframe, that very awkward boxcar with wings, turned into a base on which one can assemble almost anything. Let us take the same fuselage, install refueling probes and fuel tanks in it, and you get a flying refueling station that transfers fuel to other aircraft right in the air. Pack it with rescue gear, and out comes a search and rescue service aircraft that searches for and extracts people from the wilderness. Load it with electronics and consoles, and it is a flying command post, a headquarters lifted into the sky. In one guise, it carries passengers and rows of seats. In another, it hauls cargo pallets. In a third, it transforms into a heavy gunship version for fire support. There are variants that spray agents over fields and water. There are civil cargo versions that have worked on regular airlines for decades, carrying commercial freight. How many incarnations have there been in total? No one can name an exact figure. By various estimates, from 4 dozen to 70. Dozens of versions on the very same base. The contents, equipment, and task change, but the essence, the wing, and the character remain the same. This is where the quiet genius of the design lies. There is no need to reinvent the aircraft every time for a new need. You take a proven foundation and adapt it to the task. Cheap, fast, reliable. One machine lives not just one life, but a dozen different ones. And this is what is astonishing. Wherever you look, almost every country that needed a reliable workhorse for the skies sooner or later arrived at the very same silhouette. Around 7 dozen states across the world chose this very design. A high wing, 4 propellers, an upturned tail. This contour has become a familiar part of the sky from the tropics to the poles. And when dozens of countries want a machine for themselves, and in dozens of guises at that, something happens that no other aircraft of this kind had ever achieved before. A production line that never stops. And it is this very line that led the Hercules to a record that is hard to believe at first. Now, the very figure we have been building toward for so long. The Hercules entered production in the mid-50s, and it is still rolling off the line today, for more than 70 years in a row. This is the longest continuous production run of a military aircraft in the history of aviation, an officially recorded world record. To appreciate the scale, consider one comparison. When the first Hercules were already rolling down the assembly line, color television was still a novelty available only to a few. Since then, generations, technologies, and entire eras have changed. The television has managed to become flat and migrate into the smartphone. Yet the plane still rolls off the same factory line, brand new, straight out of the box. Over these decades, more than 2,500 aircraft have been built, and the line is not closed to this day. Of course, today's Hercules is no longer the one from '54. Externally, the silhouette has barely changed, but inside it is a completely different machine. The modern version bears the name Super Hercules. The old engines have given way to new ones from the Rolls-Royce family, direct descendants of that very first engine, but far more powerful and economical. About 4,500 horsepower each. The former propellers have been replaced by new 6-bladed ones. They provide more thrust while burning less fuel. The cockpit has changed as well. Previously, a large crew sat tightly there, pilots, a navigator, a flight engineer, each with their own instruments and duties. Now, digital electronics have taken over almost everything. Instead of a forest of dials, the pilots face large screens, and the machine is managed by just 2 people. Despite all this, the Super Hercules remains surprisingly affordable. The price remains in the range of several tens of millions of dollars, depending on the version and the year. By the standards of large aviation, this is quite modest, and it is noticeably cheaper than many competitors that can do less yet cost more. And yet, behind all these figures hides the main question, the very one for which this whole story was started. Why this one? Why has a single awkward transport survived dozens of more beautiful, faster, more modern aircraft, and still has no intention of retiring? What is its real secret? So, what is the secret? One wants to find a single thing, some super technology, a miracle material, a secret blueprint. But there is no secret ingredient. And in this, if you think about it, lies the entire answer. The Hercules did not win through a single breakthrough. It won because its creators got the formula right the first time, completely, at once. They did not chase beauty and got an honest, rugged machine. They installed a turboprop and found the golden mean between power and simplicity. They raised the floor to the height of a truck bed, added a ramp, and made loading as simple as could be. They designed in a margin of safety and room for growth, and therefore the aircraft could be updated again and again without touching the very essence. This very sound foundation allowed it to live a dozen lives. To land on a swaying deck in the middle of the ocean, to slide on skis across Antarctic ice, to fly into a hurricane and emerge whole, to stop fire, to monitor airwaves near distant borders, to haul everything that needed to be delivered to places where no one else could reach. It did not have to be reinvented for every new era. It was simply tweaked slightly, and it proved useful once again. Remember that designer who at the very beginning considered this project a mistake? He looked at the clumsy silhouette and saw a threat to the company's good name. But the exact opposite happened. It was precisely the simplicity he frowned upon that became the source of longevity. What is beautiful often ages quickly. What is simple and honest lives a long time. The aircraft has outlived almost everyone who conceived it. It has survived dozens of more fashionable rivals that were predicted to take its place. It is older than color television and still rolls off the assembly line brand new, straight out of the box. How much longer will it hold out? No one knows. Perhaps another 20 years, perhaps 50. Or perhaps our great-grandchildren will still be wondering about this, looking up at the same familiar contour, a high wing, 4 propellers, an upturned tail. The machine that was once called a mistake is in no hurry to leave, and by all accounts has no intention of doing so at all.